The deadliest mistake people make after the collapse isn't running out of food, water, or ammunition. It's believing, quietly, stubbornly, that the old world is still operating. That single assumption becomes the silent kill mechanism. It blinds people into thinking danger will behave fairly, that strangers will negotiate rationally, that time is forgiving, and that someone, somewhere, is still responsible for keeping chaos in check. But the collapse doesn't just remove safety, it deletes the rulebook that defined reality itself. What breaks first is not the grid, it's human perception. People step into the new world using the logic of the old one, dragging expectations that now function like traps. They hesitate because society conditioned them to trust hesitation. They speak loudly because noise used to dissolve into background clutter. They trust familiar faces, forgetting that scarcity rewires every instinct. In this new environment, hunger overrides morality, fear overrides empathy, and opportunity overrides restraint. A stranger isn't a person. You are a resource. A crowd isn't a group. It is a threat field. Every assumption you carry becomes leverage for someone else to exploit. Survival now operates under hard, unforgiving logic. Physics dictates what you can carry. Biology dictates how fast you fail. Psychology dictates how quickly desperation spreads. Noise becomes a beacon. Weight becomes a liability. Movement becomes your last remaining shield. Every decision, every breath, either reduces your exposure or broadcasts your position to someone watching from the dark. You are no longer living inside a society. You are navigating a shifting equation where one miscalculation ends your timeline. Your first real step isn't gathering supplies. It's deleting the mindset that kills more people than starvation or violence, the belief that the collapse is temporary. You must reformat your thinking, strip away comfort logic, and adopt survival logic, cold, precise, and mercilessly realistic. Once that shift locks into place, the 7 rules you're about to learn stop being advice. They become protocols. And protocols, not hope, are what keep you alive when the world turns predatory. If you want more hard-edged breakdowns of collapse strategy and survival logic, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next analysis. The extraction principle begins with a harsh correction. After the collapse, anything that doesn't produce measurable survival value becomes a liability. Not later. Not eventually. Immediately. Most people die carrying too much weight, making too much noise, and wasting too much energy on actions that extract nothing. Extraction is the filter that separates what keeps you alive from what kills you slowly. In the old world, efficiency was optional. You could carry unnecessary gear, take long routes, repeat tasks, or make emotional decisions without consequence. Collapse erases that luxury. Your body becomes a rapidly depleting machine, burning calories faster under stress, losing hydration through fear spikes, and weakening with every unnecessary movement. The math is unforgiving. Weight slows you. Slowness increases exposure. Exposure multiplies threat. Threat forces conflict. Conflict burns resources. The cycle spirals until you collapse from exhaustion long before an enemy touches you. Extraction applies first to physical load. Everything in your pack must pay rent. If it doesn't help you hydrate, move, defend, extract, shelter, or solve a predictable problem, it's dead weight. A sleek, expensive multi-tool with 10 functions you'll never use is a liability. A cheap, reliable blade that opens access points, processes food, and crafts solutions has extraction value. Collapse logic does not care about cost, brand, or sentimental meaning. It cares about output, but extraction extends far beyond gear. It governs movement. Every step must extract progress, distance from danger, proximity to water, elevation for observation, concealment from sightlines. Wandering without purpose is resource hemorrhage. Lingering in unsecured areas is exposure. Taking detours without benefit is calorie waste. Movement must be transactional. You spend energy only when the return justifies the cost. Extraction also applies to time. Collapse time moves differently. Every unnecessary minute increases the probability of detection, intersection, or escalation. Staying in a building that offers no shelter, no intel, no resources is not rest. It is risk compounding. Time must extract information, safety, or readiness, or it becomes a liability. And extraction governs people. Old world thinking tells you to be accommodating, patient, helpful. Collapse logic requires appraisal. A panicked stranger extracts your attention. A clingy survivor extracts your time. A desperate group extracts your safety. You evaluate every interaction through the same filter as gear. Does this person multiply your survival or drain it? If they drain, distance becomes the protocol. The extraction principle is brutal because collapse reality is brutal. It forces you to amputate every non-essential belief, habit, or possession. It cuts your decisions down to pure utility. When you internalize it, your load becomes lighter, your movement becomes quieter, and your timeline stretches. When you ignore it, you carry the old world on your back until it pulls you under. The silence dominance rule activates the moment the collapse erases the background noise of civilization. In the old world, sound was diluted. Traffic, generators, crowds, machinery. An endless acoustic blanket that hid your presence without effort. But when the grid dies, the silence becomes unnatural, heavy, predatory. In that new soundscape, even the smallest noise transforms into a location signal. A zipper becomes a beacon. A cough becomes a flare. A careless footstep becomes a directional arrow pointing straight at you. Most people underestimate this shift, and that underestimation gets them hunted long before they ever see the threat coming. Sound travels differently in a dead world. With no ambient noise to mask your movements, propagation increases. Distance extends. Echoes sharpen. Your brain, conditioned by decades of urban noise, miscalculates volume and range. What feels quiet enough in your head is dangerously loud in the open. And collapse predators, whether starving scavengers or organized groups, don't need advanced technology to detect you. They only need their ears. Humans have an innate ability to triangulate sound direction and distance faster than they can consciously explain. In scarcity, that instinct sharpens. They don't hear you, they locate you. Silence becomes power because silence denies the enemy information. Noise gives away your position, your movement speed, your physical condition, and sometimes even your intent. Silence gives them nothing. A silent profile forces uncertainty. Uncertainty forces hesitation. Hesitation destroys the confidence predators rely on. The silence dominance rule isn't about hiding. It's about controlling the engagement before it ever begins. When you produce no detectable audio signature, you remove yourself from their targeting logic entirely. Executing the rule requires discipline. You re-engineer your movement, rolling weight onto the outside of your foot, tightening gear straps, removing metal on metal points, padding inside your pack to prevent internal rattle. You regulate breathing to avoid sharp exhalations. You learn how different surfaces sound, gravel, mud, rotten wood, dry leaves, and choose routes based on acoustic advantage, not convenience. Even communication changes. In the collapse, talking becomes a resource you spend sparingly. You let gestures, positioning, and eye contact replace words. Whispering isn't safer if the environment carries it farther. Sometimes total silence is the only correct protocol. Silence also alters how others perceive you. Loud survivors signal carelessness, fear, or desperation. Silent survivors signal control. Predators hesitate when they cannot read you, cannot hear you, cannot predict you. Silence disrupts their confidence and strips them of initiative. And initiative is what determines who becomes the hunter and who becomes the hunted. Most people die because they treat silence as absence. But silence is presence, calculated, deliberate, strategic. In a world where information is as deadly as bullets, the quiet survive not because they hide, but because they refuse to be found. The threat multiplier rule begins with a truth most civilians reject until it's too late. After the collapse, every unknown is hostile until proven otherwise. Not potentially hostile. Not worth monitoring. Hostile. This isn't paranoia. It's probability. Collapse conditions amplify danger the way heat amplifies infection. Scarcity intensifies aggression. Fear shortens tempers. Desperation collapses moral boundaries. And the moment you treat an unknown as neutral, you hand them the advantage that ends you. People entering a post-collapse landscape still carry the old world assumption that strangers are simply other people. But in a world without law, consequence, or oversight, strangers become risk clusters, bundles of unpredictable intent shaped by stress, deprivation, and survival instinct. A thirsty man doesn't want your water, he needs it. A starving family doesn't ask for food, they escalate. A lone scavenger observing you isn't curious, they're assessing. In collapse psychology, opportunity overrides restraint, and the moment someone realizes you're carrying something they want, the threat multiplies. First in their mind, then in their movement, then in their decisions. Threat doesn't grow linearly, it grows exponentially. One person observing you becomes two. Two become a group. A group becomes a hunting unit. Information about you, your route, your loadout, your condition, spreads through desperate networks like wildfire. You might think you encountered a harmless stranger, but that stranger may mention you to someone more desperate, who shares it with someone more violent, until the threat you failed to classify properly evolves into a force you can't outrun or survive. This is the multiplier effect in its purest form. Small contact, large consequence. Your brain must adapt by assuming hostility from the first moment of detection. That assumption doesn't mean attacking or escalating. It means distancing, concealing, and denying information. You control exposure. You control proximity. You control the tempo. You never let an unknown person dictate direction, closing distance, or pace. Their initiative is your danger signal. If they move toward you, you reposition. If they circle your location, you exfiltrate. If they ask probing questions, you cut the interaction. Every second you spend in contact expands the threat web around you. Biology reinforces this rule. Under dehydration, hunger, and sleep loss, the human brain shifts into a reactive, impulsive state. Logical thinking declines. Aggression and suspicion rise. People become volatile without realizing it. You cannot predict their choices, but you can predict the pattern. Scarcity makes people dangerous, and danger makes them multiply. Crowds magnify this effect instantly. A single agitated individual infects a group. A group's fear becomes collective aggression. A minor trigger becomes a cascade of violence. In the collapse, crowds do not think, they react. and their reaction time is faster than your escape time if you allow yourself to be inside their radius. The threat multiplier rule is simple but merciless. Every contact expands risk. Therefore, the only safe assumption is hostility until disproven over time, distance, and repeated non-threatening behavior. This assumption doesn't make you cruel, it keeps you alive. Because refusing to see a threat won't eliminate it. It only blinds you to the moment it converges on you with amplified speed, amplified intent, and amplified consequences. The resource inversion principle forces you to confront a brutal reality. After the collapse, the value system you lived by your entire life flips upside down. What mattered in society becomes irrelevant. What you took for granted becomes the new currency. Collapse replaces economic logic with biological logic, and biology is merciless. The hierarchy shifts instantly. Water becomes superior to bullets, bullets superior to food, food superior to tools. Survivors who fail to recognize this inversion burn through their lifeline while clinging to objects that can't keep them alive. Water rises to the top because the human body is not negotiable. Dehydration doesn't ask your permission. It dismantles your cognition, your movement, and your ability to make decisions. Under collapse stress, your hydration curve crashes fast. Elevated heart rate, adrenaline surges, long movement intervals, and chaotic temperature exposure accelerate water loss beyond what most people ever experience. Mental clarity decays. Muscles seize. Your hearing dulls. Your coordination drops. Your reaction time stretches. A dehydrated survivor becomes detectable before they become functional. Water is not a comfort. It is operational uptime. Without it, no strategy works, no defense holds, no tool matters. Bullets come next, not because warfare becomes the priority, but because deterrence becomes currency. Ammunition is the only resource that can prevent a hostile encounter without being spent. The mere existence of a firearm, properly carried, properly displayed, properly handled, creates psychological distance. Attackers calculate risk, and bullets increase that calculation. But ammunition also carries weight, and weight drains your energy. So the collapse demands precision. Carry enough to project consequence, but not so much that you compromise mobility. In a world where conflict is a choice forced on you, the ability to deter is more valuable than the ability to fight. Food drops below bullets because starvation is slow, but violence is instant. You can function under hunger. You cannot function under a bullet wound or a mob's aggression. Still, calories matter. Every movement, climb, crawl, and detour pulls from your reserves. Collapse nutrition is extraction-based, high-density, low-weight, multi-purpose. A heavy meal that burdens your pack is less valuable than a compact portion that fuels movement. You are not eating for comfort. You are fueling survival math. Tools sit below food because tools represent potential, not certainty. They are only as valuable as your ability to convert them into advantage. A single blade that cuts cordage, opens containers, processes fire material, and shapes wood contributes exponentially more value than a heavy multi-tool overloaded with features you will never use. The inversion principle demands that every tool justify itself through versatility and efficiency. Anything else becomes a liability disguised as capability. The collapse punishes emotional attachment more than ignorance. People carry souvenirs, luxury gear, clever gadgets, objects that mattered before but drag them toward failure now. They cling to what feels valuable instead of what is valuable. But survival strips sentiment. Anything you carry must serve hydration, security, energy, movement, or adaptation. If it doesn't support one of those pillars, it isn't gear. It's dead weight. And dead weight is paid for with time, calories, and risk. When the resource inversion principle finally clicks, your entire worldview recalibrates. Your pack becomes lighter and sharper. Your decision-making becomes ruthless and efficient. You stop chasing abundance and start pursuing sustainability. You stop carrying the old world and start carrying only what keeps you alive in this one. Because collapse doesn't care what you value. It only cares what you can use. The mobility over defense doctrine dismantles one of the most dangerous myths people carry into the collapse, the belief that safety comes from staying put. In the old world, walls, locks, and reinforced structures created protection. But after the collapse, a fortified location doesn't represent safety. It represents opportunity to others. A static survivor is a resource cache with predictable habits. A structure that looks defensible becomes a beacon that announces two things. Someone is inside, and they have something worth taking. This transforms your safe place into a loot magnet, an attractor for every desperate, aggressive, or opportunistic person moving through the area. The collapse removes the institutions that once made defense viable. There are no reinforcements, no patrols, no emergency response. Every static location becomes a siege waiting to happen. Once someone marks your shelter, they have time, numbers, and hunger on their side. You have limited supplies, limited exits, and no guarantee the next wave will be smaller than the last. Threats don't arrive all at once, they accumulate. A scavenger notices smoke. A group hears noise. Someone tracks footprints leading in but not out. These microsignals compound until your position becomes known, and once a location enters the threat network, it stays in circulation. You cannot fortify faster than desperation spreads. Mobility, on the other hand, collapses the threat radius around you. A moving survivor controls direction, angle, timing, and exposure. Instead of defending 360 degrees indefinitely, you reduce your vulnerability to a narrow forward cone that shifts with every step. Movement denies pattern recognition. It denies tracking. It denies the enemy the ability to plan, coordinate, or approach with confidence. Attackers prefer stationary targets because stationary targets can be studied. A mobile survivor is a problem they cannot map. Physics reinforces this doctrine. Holding a position demands constant alertness, burning calories at an unsustainable rate. Your mind and body remain locked in readiness, an expensive state under collapse conditions. Movement, by contrast, allows strategic bursts of exertion followed by controlled recovery. You expend energy only when it matters. In a world where calories are scarce and hydration is fragile, defense becomes a metabolic death sentence. Mobility keeps you within your energy budget. Terrain transforms when you adopt mobility as doctrine. You stop thinking in terms of safe places and start thinking in terms of safe intervals. Shelter is temporary. Rest is a pause, not a residence. Every location is judged by its exit vectors, concealment angles, and approach routes. You avoid choke points, abandoned structures with only one door, and elevated positions that silhouette you against the skyline. You move through transitional zones, places where you can disappear as easily as you appear. The collapse favors the fluid and punishes the fixed. The psychological advantage is enormous. Predators expect people to dig in. They expect fear to anchor you. When you move with controlled unpredictability, you become harder to classify, harder to track, and harder to approach. Mobility strips enemies of initiative. They cannot lure you, corner you, or study you. They are forced into reactive mode, and reactive mode is where mistakes explode. Mobility is not running, it is refusing entrapment. It is the discipline to leave before comfort roots you in place. A fortified shelter might protect you once, but mobility protects you continuously. Defense ends in siege. Mobility denies siege. Defense forces you to be right every second. Mobility only requires you to avoid being found. The world after collapse teaches one lesson with unforgiving clarity. The safest place is never a place. It is the ability to leave any place before it becomes your coffin. The predictability I kill mechanism exposes the flaw that destroys more survivors than violence, starvation, and exposure combined. Routine. Humans are wired for patterns. Patterns feel safe. Patterns create comfort. But in a collapse environment, patterns become the most readable and exploitable form of weakness. The moment your movements, habits, or reactions become predictable, you stop being a ghost and start being a schedule, something a hostile observer can track, time, and terminate without ever confronting you directly. In a world without law, surveillance shifts from cameras to human eyes. Predators, desperate scavengers, territorial groups, opportunistic hunters do not need equipment to find you. They only need time. One sighting reveals your direction. A second confirms your pace. A third exposes your pattern. And once a hostile mind identifies a pattern, the hunt becomes mathematics. They no longer need to chase you. They only need to wait where you will inevitably appear. Predictability turns your survival path into an ambush route you designed for them. Pattern tracking is instinctive. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, reading subtle behavioral repetitions, favored paths, resting spots, timing cues. The collapse sharpens this instinct because scarcity rewards attention. A person who sees you pass the same trail twice no longer wonders who you are. They wonder what else you might repeat. A group that sees you gather water at predictable intervals doesn't need to confront you. They simply wait for your next visit. Entropy protects you. Repetition kills you. The environment itself becomes a witness against you. Footprints refreshed along the same route reveal habit. Worn vegetation marks your approach vector. Disturbed debris aligns with your gait. Even your reaction patterns. How you freeze, how you retreat, how you handle surprise, become data. A predictable survivor doesn't just leave a trail, they leave a timetable. The zero pattern protocol exists to counter this. You break every expectation the moment it forms. You never travel the same route on consecutive days. You never approach the same resource point from the same angle. You vary your timing, earlier, later, delayed, accelerated. You change pacing, long strides, short steps, sudden pauses. You rotate rest points, shift shelter intervals, and leave locations without clear directional clues. Unpredictability is not chaos, it's controlled entropy. You create just enough variation to overload any observer trying to map your behavior. Predictability also operates internally. Your emotional tells, panic spikes, hesitation, default escape directions are patterns. If you always retreat the same way, you are readable. If you freeze at the same stimuli, you are exploitable. Collapse psychology demands you rewrite your reflexes. Sometimes you pause instead of fleeing. Sometimes you advance instead of retreating. Sometimes you silence your breath instead of gasping. A mind that behaves in straight lines becomes prey. A mind that fractures its own patterns becomes difficult to decode. The kill mechanism activates silently. You never notice when someone starts tracking you. You never hear the conversation where your habits are exchanged within a desperate group. You never see the moment they connect your movements into a coherent model. Everything feels normal until the day your path intersects a trap that fits you too perfectly to be coincidence. Predictability didn't just expose you, it scheduled your elimination. The post-collapse world is not won by strength or courage, but by invisibility within the mental maps of others. To survive, you must become a variable no threat can solve, unpatterned, unclockable, untrackable. When they cannot predict you, they cannot find you. And when they cannot find you, you live. The micro-decision survival law strips away the cinematic illusion of survival and exposes the truth. People don't die because of one catastrophic mistake. They die because of a long chain of tiny ignored decisions, each one small enough to feel harmless, but together lethal enough to collapse their timeline. In a post-collapse environment, micro-decisions determine everything. A 5-second delay, a single misplaced step, an unnecessary whisper, a careless glance, an extra sip of water. These micro-errors accumulate, escalate, and eventually converge into a moment you cannot escape. The collapse transforms your life into a continuous sequence of calculations. Every movement interacts with physics, biology, and risk. Step on dry leaves, and you announce your position. Stop to rest at the wrong angle, and you silhouette yourself against the skyline. Misjudge wind direction, and your breathing carries farther than you intended. Turn your back to a sound for 1 second too long, and that 1 second becomes the opening someone needs. None of these decisions feel dramatic in the moment. But the collapse is ruthless precisely because it magnifies the microscopic. Biology reinforces this danger. Under stress, your adrenal system floods your body with hormones that increase heart rate, accelerate dehydration, and destabilize fine motor control. Tiny errors multiply. You fumble gear you should have handled smoothly. You trip on terrain you should have read correctly. You drink more water than necessary because your physiology is lying to you. Panic wastes hydration. Overthinking wastes calories. Even fear has a metabolic cost. Micro decisions in your biology, breathing too fast, tensing too long, failing to regulate movement, drain you faster than threats can. Crowd psychology adds another layer. Human groups under collapse conditions behave like pressure systems, unpredictable, reactive, and easily triggered. The micro decision of choosing to cut through a street instead of circling around it might intersect you with a volatile group in the exact moment they are primed for aggression. A 3-second delay might place you inside a conflict zone that was empty just minutes before. Timing is not luck. It is micro-discipline. Survival timing is measured not in minutes but in moments. To navigate this world, your micro-decisions must become deliberate. You control your foot placement. You regulate breathing to stay silent and conserve hydration. You scan terrain in small, constant increments instead of large, dramatic sweeps. You ration calories according to movement intensity, not hunger. You treat every stop, every detour, every sound as a variable in an equation where risk is cumulative. Micro-decisions also shape your internal stability. Panic arrives in spikes, but composure is built in fragments. One breath, one recalibration, one quiet step. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be consistently correct in the smallest ways. One correct micro-choice prevents 5 future threats. One saved calorie extends your safety margin. One quiet step removes you from someone's detection window. Survival is not built in grand decisions. It is built in the invisible ones. thousands of small, silent judgments that keep you between threat lines instead of inside them. Ignore them, and you die slowly without understanding why. Master them, and you navigate the collapse like a ghost, unseen, unfollowed, and unclaimed by the chaos swallowing the world. Integration happens when the 7 rules stop functioning as isolated tactics and fuse into a single operating system. Survival is no longer a set of choices. It becomes a lens you see through. Extraction strips away everything that wastes energy. Silence prevents you from becoming a detectable signal. Mobility keeps you from becoming a stationary target. Threat awareness prevents you from assuming safety where none exists. Resource inversion keeps your priorities aligned with biology, not comfort. Unpredictability removes you from enemy mental maps. Micro decisions reinforce every rule at the smallest scale. When these principles merge, you stop acting like a person reacting to danger and start operating like a system designed for hostile terrain. Each rule strengthens the next. Mobility is impossible without extraction. Silence collapses without micro-discipline. Threat avoidance fails if you become predictable. Resource management collapses without movement. The system is circular. Break one link, and the entire chain fails. But when the chain holds, you move through the collapse with controlled invisibility. You avoid fights instead of surviving them. You deny predators the information they need. You conserve the resources that sustain you. You become the variable the world cannot solve. And if you want more breakdowns like this, raw, tactical, and brutally realistic, make sure to subscribe to the channel.